This is 2-year-old me working in the backyard with my dad, and 27 years later, not much has changed, though I no longer wear onesies or work with a pacifier in my mouth. But here's the same hammer I'm holding, the same speed square that's on the ground, and even the same style earmuffs that I prefer. And behind me, the same sawhorse. A sawhorse design that my dad built more than 40 years ago, and one that's followed him through every decade of his life as a tradesman. And in a world where traditions are being lost to algorithms, this design has stood strong in my family. It's simple, it's affordable, and today I want to pass it on. Not because my dad pioneered it, but because he learned it the old-fashioned way, by watching the older tradesmen he worked with as a young, what he would call, hey boy, running around doing whatever needed to be done. He even came up with one key feature that makes these sawhorses better than all of the rest. And what looks like just an inconsequential sawhorse was actually the foundation he used to build the world around me and provide for our family. Today, I want to pass it on to you. Pops actually first built these sawhorses back in the early 80s when there wasn't the luxury of remote computer jobs, endless online job listings, and the work was tough and dangerous. With no college degree and living in a small town in Alabama, Pops just had to go wherever there was work, and at 19, he became an iron worker building the Dolly Parton Bridge, one of the longest in the country at the time. Those black and white photos that you've seen of men standing on steel I-beams hundreds of feet in the air, that was him as just a teenager. After that, he went on to be a carpenter, roofer, cabinet maker, crane rigger, ship coordinator, chemical plant operator, and even a volunteer fireman. In his early 20s, he drove all the way from Alabama to Wyoming hoping to find work. Later, he even trained in Europe to become a chemical plant operator. And for as long as I've been alive, he's driven an hour and 20 minutes each way to work shifts at the chemical plant. And though his job is much safer today, my mom tells me of times he would come home with holes in his clothes due to chemical exposure. He's obviously built different, just like his sawhorse design. So I'm out here working on Hagrid's hut, and my sawhorse is pretty much disintegrated, so it's time to build a new one. The problem is I don't actually know how to build these sawhorses because my dad has always made my sawhorses. It's been like a tradition of his that whenever he makes a new pair of sawhorses, he always builds like 2 pairs at a time. And I've always kind of gotten the second pair or one of the pairs that are just floating around. And this pair, I think he built me when we bought this house 4 years ago, and they have lived outside their entire life, bless their hearts, because they have just rotted away being untreated. But we're gonna make some new ones. I just have to figure out what the measurements should be because Pops always just sort of built these things on instinct and he never really wrote down the measurements. So yeah, we're just gonna have to figure it out. What I love about this project is how simple it is and how few tools you need. Anyone can do this project and it's the foundation for many more to come. All you need is a tape measure, a speed square, a hammer or mallet, as well as a drill and the matching drill bit size for whatever dowels you plan on using. And then you're also going to need something to cut with, so whether it's a hand saw, a circular saw, or a miter saw. And if you really want to make your life easy and support the channel, then feel free to head in the description below and pick up a copy of the book that I recently published, which is dedicated to Pops and his sawhorse design that has literally built the world around me. There's clearly a lot of genius throughout these sawhorses, but one of the things that I didn't mention yet is that it only takes 6 2x4s, a dowel, some wood glue, and some screws to make not only a cheaper sawhorse, but one that is profoundly better. It's easy for the details to go unnoticed on these sawhorses, and before I understood the value of these, I foolishly went out and bought the expensive plastic folding sawhorses. I thought I knew better, and these old heavy sawhorses I grew up with must be outdated. At first, they were great. They were lightweight, folded away easily, and most importantly, they didn't take any time to make. My foolish, blind ambition marked down as, I quote, "great investment as my time is far too valuable to be spent making sawhorses." As time has gone on though, this whole time is money hustle culture has worn thin on my mind, like a cheap pair of jeans. There is value in doing things the right way over consuming disposables at a mind-numbing rate. The store-bought sawhorses broke almost immediately, would self-collapse with the slightest nudge, and if you cut into them, well, you ruined them and possibly your blade too. They became a liability. Take a look at my dad's sawhorses. They are twice the width to allow full sheets of plywood to be dropped on them. The height is precisely right for seeing and controlling the cut of a circular saw. The legs are splayed outwards, which broadens their stance and adds a tremendous amount of stability. A brace is added at the legs to keep them from blowing apart under extreme loads. The bottom of the legs is cut on a compound angle to provide the most stable, rock-free sawhorse possible. The block under the beam is only 6 inches instead of extending all the way across. It didn't need to be, but this reduces the amount of materials and allows a place for your hands to go when you're stacking them. The top board overhangs the beam, which allows you to get closer to your work and clamp down full sheets of plywood. The top is pinned with wooden dowels so that you can cut into the sacrificial top anywhere without damaging a blade. Lastly, the brace is positioned in just the right place where these sawhorses can stack on top of one another. Pop's always reminded me that these sawhorses are meant for work, so they are all scarred up from projects, from cutting into them and things, and we don't baby these things because they have a intended lifespan. They're fairly cheap to make and they serve their purpose. So it's important not to make these things too much of an art form and keep them highly functional. You helping, Dada? Something tells me that not too long from now, we're going to be needing to build 3 pairs of sawhorses instead of just 2. The funny thing about building a sawhorse is that it's a lot easier to build one if you already have a sawhorse. It's kind of like buying a new pocket knife and it comes in those plastic packaging that's like impossible to open without a pocket knife. But we're gonna keep it real. We're gonna build it on the floor. With the design done, it's time to build a new pair. But before I go any further, this video is sponsored by Reolink, and I wanted to take a moment to thank them, because the older I get, the more I realize that the things that we build matter, and so does protecting them. I recently installed Reolink's new Elite Floodlight Wi-Fi camera on the side of my house to watch over the side of our property. And as always, Reolink makes installing this so simple. They pay attention to the little details, and it's obvious that they actually care about the customer's experience, which I really appreciate. They add in this little bitty loop so that when you're installing it, the camera hangs down from something instead of you having to hold it with 2 hands and connect all the wires. It's amazing. And all you have to do is connect 3 wires together, push it up into place, and use 2 screws to secure it. And because this mounts where a traditional floodlight would mount, it means it has constant power and you never have to worry about recharging it. And once it's in place, you can move the lights in the camera in virtually any direction to make sure everything is well lit and protected. With this camera's 3,000 lumens of adjustable light, it's pretty much bright enough to light up the entire side yard, and I can even switch between warm and cold color temperatures, as well as have the lights come on and off automatically. And the best part of all is it is a 180-degree field of view camera, so with just one camera I can see the entire side yard in crystal clear 4K, so there's no blind spots at all, and the smart detection is super accurate on these cameras, so it always knows the difference between people, cars, and animals. You can even draw virtual fences and set up intrusion zones in the app, so you only get alerts in places that you actually care about. And for me, all of Reolink's cameras around my house have been instrumental, and there's some of those tools that I immediately just feel better having. And if you've been on the fence for a while about these cameras, now is a great time to check them out because Reolink has just started their Black Friday sale, and you can check that out at their website at reolink.com or by scanning the QR code on the screen. Thank you so much, Reolink, for sponsoring this video. Let's get back to building a sawhorse. It always seems like getting started on a project is the hardest part, but thankfully this time I've got Pops' guide in hand and I'm ready to go. So let's get started by measuring out the beam of the sawhorse. Kind of the heart of the sawhorse and what gives it all its structure. You gonna be good there? I gotta make lots of noise. You can stay there if you want. One way to make this project a little bit easier without sawhorses is to stack the boards on top of each other and just set the depth of the cut just through the first board. Good girl, Scruff. You good girl. Probably my most used tool, second to my pencil, is a speed square, and I believe this one's actually from the 80s, and it still obviously works just as good today as it did back then. And just like that, we have one of the 4 braces that we're going to need for the legs. And here comes one of the 4 blocks that we're going to use to attach the legs to the beam and the top. Now, admittedly, the legs are a little bit challenging because they require a compound cut, and if you've never done that before, it can be intimidating. But here are a few examples to give you an idea. The compound cut is simply an angled mitered cut, so an angle across the board, as well as having the blade tilted at the same time. And that's so easily accomplished by just tilting the saw blade on your miter saw or your circular saw to the desired angle, and then just cutting on your line. That's all you have to do. If you want to build these sawhorses, this is going to be the most useful clip for you. First, I'm going to mark the end of a board at 10 degrees, and I'm going to cut that without the blade tilted, so this is just a miter cut. Next, I'm going to measure from the longest point that I just cut down to the desired length of my leg. I'm going to scratch a line that's square across there, and then I'm going to move my square to the other side of the board, and I'm going to draw the opposing angle so that the angles are parallel to one another. Now, stepping over the board and tilting my saw blade to the compound angle, I am going to simply cut across that line, and that is going to be leg number 1. Slide the board down, flip it over, and measure from the longest point again down to the same length of leg before marking the angle again on the opposing side so that they're parallel and making a cut across without the blade tilted. And there you have it. Leg number 2 that is mirrored, which is the most important part, and the hardest to wrap your brain around. So I hope that was helpful. I giggled a little bit looking at this clip because this illustrates the different building styles between my dad and I. I am the perfectionist, have to measure to get this board exactly centered here on the top, and he would have just eyeballed this and he would have been within a 16th or so and it would have been perfectly fine. Here, however, I am, gotta be within a 32nd. And he always used to say, "We're not building a piano, Dylan, just get it close enough." With that same level of perfection shining through, I went ahead and marked out for where all of my screw holes would be because, again, I'd have them perfectly spaced out. I just went ahead and pre-drilled all the way through these with them clamped in place. That way I could add glue in there and it wouldn't be super hard to get them lined back up, because if you've ever tried to do that, it's a pretty slippery job. And just use some big 3-inch screws to fasten that thing down before flipping over the entire top beam and adding in our little blocks that I talked about cutting earlier, and then we could just set aside this beam and work on the next one. With the glue dried on the beams, it's time to add in our legs, and we just want to make sure that we have that compound cut facing the correct way so that when they sit on the ground, they sit flat. It's pretty easy to mix them up, so I thought I would mention that. And we just use some more of those same 3-inch screws to attach these legs in place. And it's important to start by attaching the ones at the top here, or else it's going to be trying to pull the leg away the entire time you screw it in. So start with the top ones and then move to the bottom ones. With the first side done and both legs in place, we just need to roll it over and repeat the same steps for the other side. And would you look at that, a nice sturdy sawhorse. But there's actually one thing we can do to improve it just a little bit, and that's by adding these little braces in. That's going to help during those extreme loads. Unfortunately though, not all sawhorses will end up without a rock like this, but there's a very simple way to fix this without having to cut off the legs. All you need to do is unscrew the leg, pull it in or out, whichever direction it needs to go so that it's sitting flat, and then start to screw it in place again. And once you add that cross brace in, just go ahead and screw that leg back down tight, and they're going to be rock solid without any wobble. Just when you thought these sawhorses were done, my dad had one last trick up his sleeves, and that's to remove these top screws holding the top board down because the glue is dry, and we are going to be replacing them with dowels because he found over the years of using these, if you ever accidentally hit one of these screws, which you would think would be a 1 in a million shot, but apparently it happens quite often, you ruin a saw blade. So by simply replacing those with a wooden dowel, you completely eliminate that problem. Pretty clever. Before these go into service, we need to make sure that they stack together nicely, and that when you put them next to each other, that they're actually the same height, and thankfully these pass the test. But I decided I'm gonna church these up a bit for my dad, so we're gonna whip out the hand plane, we're gonna plane off the top surfaces, and we're gonna be chamfering over all the edges. I'm sure he's gonna love it. I'm pretty excited to see what my dad thinks about these new sawhorses, especially considering I don't think anyone's ever built him a pair. He's always just built them for everyone else. But first, let's get some dinner with the family, and then we'll head on over. What are you doing? You want to get your high chair and eat some dinner? Watch out, Scruffy. Go see Pops or Pearl? You put your chickens away for the night? We're gonna go see Pops. You wanna go see Pops? For those that have watched the channel for a while now, you'll recognize this door. It's the door to my dad's shop, a shop that he graciously allowed Molly and I to start our business in and basically overrun for many years. But as he pulls in from yet another shift at the plant, I'm excited to see what he thinks about his new sawhorses. Planed all these boards. I just took like a 16th off of them.
That's a good looking sawhorse.
You'll often hear the phrase, a key to a man's heart is through his stomach. But I would like to propose that the key to a man's soul is through the admiration of his craft. Thanks for all you do, Pops.